had a fun conversation, and it sort of got born out of a conversation around hierarchy of wealth. And, what are the first things we do in life? What are the second things? And how do we progress up in life towards something that is really stable, really wealthy? And one of the things that I thought was somewhat controversial compared to prevailing advice was that first layer in the hierarchy of wealth, I believe, is really savings and protection, and not necessarily debt consolidation or debt knockout. And I think the advice that I got whenever I was growing up was, I don't care what you do, you max out your 401k and you knock out your debt. And honestly, I think those two big pieces of advice are exactly the wrong piece of advice when you're first starting out. And so I thought we could talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, I actually am on board with this because I think I look at a lot of the advice that's out there right now, and it seems to me that most of it is geared towards trying to help you make sure that you're not going broke, as opposed to truly setting you up to build wealth over your lifetime. And I think understanding the difference in outcomes is really a key here, because if you're not looking at the outcome, then you kind of get what you get and you don't throw a fit.
Right. Well, and I think that first layer for me is really all about keeping you in the game and not getting knocked out by stuff that you can't control. And so it's really those habits. And I think the habits are really that foundation that help you sort of really progress up. Bad habits create faulty plans. Good habits create really good plans. And so really what my thought on that is, first around debt consolidation, then we can jump into 401 if we have time. But if you don't have a cushion, if you've got a lot of debt and you have no money in your savings account because every single dollar is going to debt consolidation or debt payoff, then the very next thing that happens to you, you're right back into more debt. Yeah. Water heater breaks, tires break, whatever.
I definitely have seen this where people come in and they get so aggressive with how they're paying down their debt, but they aren't building a cushion, at least simultaneously.
Right.
And then, something happens, they get a flat tire, they need a new set of tires, and they end up charging the debt back onto the credit card they just paid off. And the amount of just abject demoralization that occurs in that situation frequently derails people, because they get into this kind of mindset of, what's the point? No matter what I do, I can't get ahead.
Right.
And I think that feeling is incredibly pervasive, even among affluent Americans, right? I mean, we talk to people who are making 6 and sometimes 7-figure paychecks who tell us they feel like they're paycheck to paycheck. And it goes back to, what do you have in the bank? And how do you know that things don't go wrong? Because there's this sort of feeling, right, that if I don't have debt, I have safety. And the reality is that that's not always true.
Right. And I think you nailed it. I think 90% of winning at life is staying in the game. And sort of being able to kind of build the system so that you understand that something's going to happen that you don't like. And if you understand that that's going to happen and you build around that, then when it happens, you're like, all right,
you're prepared.
I'm prepared for that.
I mean, that's the whole reason we have car insurance, right? That's not really a product we spend a whole lot of time in, but there are specific ways that you should structure it. And when you look at what happens there, the whole point of that is that if I total someone's Maserati, my financial plan is stable. I'm not writing a 6-figure check to somebody at that point.
Right.
I'm just going on about my business because I have the appropriate coverage, and the insurance company is going to write that check. Right? Sometimes giving up small amounts of money in order to protect a large pool of money is a really smart decision.
Yeah. Build the moat before you build a castle is sort of the motto on that side, right?
Yeah.
And the other one, I think, and so I'm going to ask a question on that side, and then I want to pivot to 401. But if you were talking to a client and they're in that, I got to pay off debt, but I got to save. At what point is it 4 months of savings? Is it 1 month? What point do you go, all right, you've got enough in cushion, now it's time to redirect?
Yeah. Again, I think that answer really depends on even things as simple as stability of income, right?
That's a good point.
If you have a very predictable paycheck, that's very different than if you're a freelancer and one month it's feast and the next month it's famine, right? And so I think those numbers change kind of dramatically. I think it is not necessarily an either or decision. It's that you're doing it at the same time. And then I also think it depends on the type of debt. Because if it's consumer debt at a double-digit interest rate, then I want to knock that down pretty quickly. But if it's student loan debt at a very low interest rate, if you actually look at the math, it frequently makes sense just to prolong how long you're taking to pay that off so that you can get growth on the dollars. And again, that interest rate is really the determining factor there. But again, it's not the only factor, because if you said, look, right now I'm working and I feel like I can't quit my job and have babies and stay at home with them until I get rid of the student loan, then you understand that's not, in some ways, that's an economic decision, right? But it really has more to do with immediate life choices than it does to do with long-term financial profitability.
Yeah, and wealth creation and those other things, right?
Right. So I totally was evasive on answering your question, but
no,
I'm
but I
guessing
think that's
you
the right
asked
answer.
it because you had an answer in mind.
No, but I think that's it. I mean, I think the answer is the stupid no answer of it depends.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the idea that if it's consumer debt and you're paying 27% on your credit card, then maybe once you get about 1 month in the bank of savings, then maybe you start shifting a little bit more to knock that out instead of a nice even blend between savings and debt, right? But if the debt's 8% and not 27%, then maybe it's a more even split. Or even if it's 3%, then whatever, I'll pay it off as long as they'll let me pay it off. I'm not rushing to that party, right?
At this point, inflation is worse than that. And it's getting cheaper and cheaper, even though your payment's the same.
Right. Yeah. So but I think that model is a way to go approach it. And the other one I think is always entertaining on that side. And entertaining is sort of a rough word, more of I find it interesting is probably the right way to say it is. But man, all I've heard my whole life is we invest in our 401k. So I got a job, they've got a 401k, I should put my money in. And I'm like, not so fast, cowboy. And I think it goes back to that idea of savings, protection, building a foundation, because I can't spend the 401k. It's really hard to get access if something bad happens.
Right. And that's where I think liquidity has to come before that. There's this sort of I think it goes to take risk when you're young and then be conservative when you're older. Yep. And in some ways, I feel like even that is backwards, because if I have $10,000 and I lose $10,000, it's pretty catastrophic because that's all my money. Whereas if I have $1 million and I want to take a flyer on an investment that's $10,000, in that scenario, if I lose all $10,000, it's not a great day because no one ever likes losing money, but I still have almost everything. Right. And so I think that calculated risk is very different than just putting all of your money at risk. And the true difference between savings and investments are that savings, the principal is protected. It can only go up. Whereas investments can go up, and maybe more than a savings vehicle would, but it can also go down. And so you have to remember that investments always have a chance of loss. And I think sometimes we like to forget that.
Well, and I think especially over the last, 14 years, 13 or 14 years, once we've got kind of 09 and up, it's been a fairly nice ride. I mean, it's amazing what happens when the government dumps a bunch of money into the market. The market has a tendency to go up. It's like, I can't imagine how that works. And so, we've had a pretty nice run for the last 13 years. We're paying for it now, but, so I think we have forgotten what happens when the market is not an amazing place to live.
Right. And that's to me where having that savings component, having that protection component matters. And even to go back to that protection piece, there is what is the point of building your empire if like that, when I snap my fingers, it could all go away. Right. The point of doing this is to make sure that the fruits of your labor are there for you for the rest of your life, and to make sure that the next generation is in a better position than you yourself were. right? And I would say that that is true, not only from a financial standpoint, but in any context. You can put that in education, emotion, all of those things, but you can't do those things and just constantly be putting dollars at risk. You have to make sure that you're building something that's stable, right? To go to a house building analogy, you can't frame up a house without laying the foundation first.
Right.
Can you? Actually, yes, you can. It's just a terrible idea, right? But
Right.
it's the exciting part when you see all that framework go out and the rooms coming in, you
Right.
get to see that the foundation frequently takes a really long time.
And nobody points to the foundation and go, dude, that thing is awesome.
That's
right?
amazing. That's an amazing foundation.
Right.
You
Nobody
got this.
cares, right?
Yeah.
Until
So,
it's not there.
yeah. And I think this goes kind of back to that idea of patient capital, right? Sometimes doing the adult responsible thing is not the most fun or the most exciting or the sexiest, right? But it frequently is the most practical. And I think that's where your core and explore is so important, because it's taking care of the things that are primary first and then exploring for rate of return, and where your hierarchy comes in. I think all of that is just so brilliant, because if we can frame it and we can describe it, it makes it a lot easier to actually implement.
Yeah. And it makes it at least palatable, I think, to some extent. So where can they find you out there on the interwebs?
At The Wealth Woman, wherever you are on social media.
That's a great catch-all. And I'm Economics with Eric on Instagram and Facebook, and then just Eric Alexander on LinkedIn. So great having you with us today. And if you have any other questions, reach out. Have a great week.